I thought I sent you a longer bio. No, I just first want to start off by apologizing. Um, I usually iron my shirts before I speak, and my hotel had only a steamer. Have you ever used a steamer to try to get out wrinkles? It does not work at getting out wrinkles, but my face, oh my gosh, I look 10 years younger, so this are some good things. The surveys are really important. The surveys really help the organization know who they want back last year. Apparently, I got such a good survey that they asked me to come back, but to bring somebody. I thought that was funnier when I wrote it last night. But I did want to share a couple of things before I brought up Philip. First of all, I'm celebrating, well, this would be my 31st, but last year was my 30th anniversary with my wife. I figure a Catholic organization would be happy about that. So you know, 30 years is a long time. That wasn't supposed to be the funny part. But 30 years is a long time. You know, the number one reason for divorce, women say, is because their husbands don't listen to them. And so I can honestly say for the last 30 years, I've never heard my wife say that once. Now, that's just an intelligence test, just to see how smart you guys are. Because, and you guys, you got it. So I'm really happy. Because, you know, about 85% of the general population is deficient in math. That's why I'm happy I'm part of the other 25%. So, thank you. That was louder over there. You must be an executive director. No. CFO. My brother's the CFO. Their brother's the CFO. All right, great. But I just wanted to tell you real quick about my trip to Rome with my wife for our 30th. And we went to go see Pope Leo. And boy, was it amazing. We were in the St. Peter's Square, and just probably 100,000 people. It was amazing watching him from a distance. You see this little figure, white, walking down, and people cheering and yelling and grabbing and pushing, and then he came really close, and we were like this with each other. I had that kind of a moment with Pope Leo. I couldn't believe it. And he looked into my eyes, and I'll never forget what he said. He said, "Let go." All right, so why am I here? You're probably wondering. I had no intention of being in philanthropy. And I hear that a lot at these kinds of conferences. But I don't want to say the Lord picked me, that sounds, but I really, I was studying to be a deacon, or I was discerning to be a deacon. And all of a sudden I got a tap on the shoulder from a longtime friend, said, "Hey, we need some help at the foundation, kind of rebuilding, would you come?" And, you know, I said yes. And I don't know if I knew exactly why I said yes, but 2.5 years later, there's nothing else I would rather do. There's just nothing else I would rather do. This is so meaningful. And the potential to be transformational are already just some of the things that we've been doing. Last year I spoke on appreciated assets. And so if you haven't heard that talk, you know, go back to the YouTube channel and watch me again. But it's really important that we start to learn that language. So I want to thank Carl. I want to thank Peter. They just run an amazing conference. This is my favorite one to come to. I did take their summer course in North Dakota. It was amazing. It was the best week I ever spent. And so, and they didn't tell me to say that, but I really do mean that. So today, what are we here for today? Well, we're actually going to be hearing from a donor. And what's the ultimate message? Well, I'll tell you what my ultimate message is that the Lord demands the best from us. And he deserves excellence. So we represent the church. All of us represent the church. And so when we go out there, remember that we can be transformational. They deserve excellence. And we need to think big and to help them to think big and what that means. And so with that, you heard a lot of talking about, oh, here's how you approach a donor, and here's what they want, and here's how you build trust, which is all great stuff, leading you to this point, which is to hear from a donor and to hear really what they want and how they think. So I'd like to introduce Philip Rizzo. So Philip Rizzo is a CEO of the largest privatized military housing in the US. They oversee over 36,000 homes throughout the US for the military. And where's Kevin? Is Kevin still here? No, we met Kevin last night for drinks, and Kevin said he was in the Marines. So Philip said, well, thank you for your service. And I'll never forget Kevin's response. Yeah, there you are. Do you remember what you told him? He said, yeah, thank you. He said, well, thank you for your service. He says, thank you for your taxes. Right? But CEO of one of the largest, with the largest privatized homes, also one of the largest employee-owned corporations, and a father of 5, and just a wonderful man. But wait, as the third wise man said to Mary, there's myrrh. He's also served in the Army honorably, and his father was a retired colonel for the Air Force. So just a wonderful military family. So Philip, if you would please come up. Please give him a round of applause. So we're going to have to pass the mic back and forth.
Okay.
It's going to be really hard for me to let go. But Pope Leo told me to let go, so
Yeah.
I'm going to. Yeah.
That's good.
Thank you.
Good advice.
So we'll do it this way. Thank you. Oh, that's good, right? So first start off a little bit about your day. Tell us what a CEO's day really looks like so folks understand kind of your life, your day in and day out.
I will. But first I want to say thank you for the opportunity to be here. Humbling to be among this group of people. I think, it's the 800th Jubilee of St. Francis. And so, who did a great job asking for money. And so, to build as many churches in our church. And so, it's kind of a great tie-in today to be here with all of you. I am a father of 5, but 4 of my kids are out of the house, and I have a forever son. My youngest is 21 with CP, and so my day starts usually if he's out of school, it'll start with mass. If he's in school, then I'm getting him out of bed. But usually I get up around so Monday was no school, so got up Monday at 5, went to daily mass. Thankfully there's a 6:30 mass, and usually stay for a little bit of adoration. I'm at the office about 7:15, and then 7:30, my assistant comes in. 7:45, I meet with the executive team. But from 7:30 to 7:45 is really the opportunity for my EA and I to meet and talk about what the day's going to bring. And then 7:45, I hear what's going on in the rest of the company. We have about 1,500 employees across the country. So Quantico, San Diego, Camp Pendleton, and all the bases in between. So we're spread out. So we bring everybody on East Coast and West Coast in the morning, and then by 8 o'clock I'm back-to-back meetings, usually 50-minute chunks, so I have time to use the restroom. And occasionally I get a call, but while I'm on my first 2 calls, which on Mondays are from 8 to 9 or 8:50, and then 9 to 9:50, she's going through my email from the weekend, cleaning out all the solicitations. So that's kind of what she's doing. So when I get to my email, I'm looking at just the ones I have to respond to. So that's one of the things that I think when we talked about, like, how do we get to people in the seat. But that's kind of the crux of the day. And then usually I'm home by 5. And I have a pretty staunch rule with my team. I don't work after 5, so you shouldn't work after 5. So don't email me after 5, and I won't email you after 5. But 7:30 to 5, we're going full out. So.
Yeah, and I think this is really important. So how would someone get to you if they wanted to talk to you about philanthropy?
Through an introduction, usually. So I think for this group, when we are thinking about how do you engage with somebody, the first thing that I would say, and I started, Anthony and I met 27 years ago in sales, and commission-only sales. So, and my family didn't eat if I didn't go out and secure it. And so that will be motivating. But I think that idea of getting an introduction through somebody else is really key. And that takes a little bit of homework. So when I was doing, for example, when I did outside sales, if I was going to a law office to see a partner, I would look up who the other partners were. And then I would say, hey, while I'm here, Anthony, do you mind if I go visit and introduce myself to Peter? Do you think he'd be open to an introduction? And he's like, yeah, you can go say hi to Peter. I think he's Catholic, or fill in the blank. And so I would go down the hall and introduce myself to Peter and say, hi, Peter, I'm Philip. I've been working with Anthony. I'm from the Diocese of Orange. I'd love to maybe sit down with you and tell you about some of the stuff we're doing. And it's just a quick, easy, non-threatening way to get an introduction through somebody I know. And that's certainly, I think, if anybody knows Dan Steiner and Preborn, that organization, but that's how I got involved with Preborn, is actually through Anthony and through somebody else that introduced me in a very non-threatening way. And then I become a donor with Preborn and get to that organization. So, and then when Dan was in my office, he said, well, I'm here, who could I meet? And at the time, there was other folks in my office, and I was able to introduce him to somebody who's also been now a donor for 10 years. So to me, I think that the best way to do it is through a trusted connection.
Yeah, and how important is that? Because one, they're not going to get to you via your phone or email, but how important is who is introducing you to them, right? Do you value that other person's relationship, right?
Yeah, look, I think that's important, but I think what's important, I was talking to Anthony about this earlier, I'm in a peer group with 16 other CEOs, and we meet once a month and we talk about our businesses, unrelated businesses, so there's no conflict. We all sign NDA, so we don't disclose anything we shouldn't disclose. But I will tell you, in those meetings, and as somebody who's in the seat, I have imposter syndrome. There are days that I feel like I shouldn't be here. I'm not worthy to be here. Why am I in this spot? And constantly going to school, taking classes, trying to get myself educated. And when we were in financial services sales together, we would be up till 10 o'clock at night studying, split dollar and these reverse transactions, things that we never sold, honestly. But we had imposter syndrome. We didn't want to go make a call on a high net worth individual and not know what they knew. And now in the seat, I don't know what I'm supposed to know. And I'm talking. I'm being honest. And it took me a while. I've been a CEO now for 6 years, but to be in a room and have the CFO spitting acronyms at me, and I'm smiling and nodding, like, oh my gosh, I got to go Google all this stuff, and I'm just frantically taking notes on everything he's saying, because I went to UCLA grad school.
But that's when there was Google. Now you'd use ChatGPT.
Yes,
right?
yeah, this is true. But that idea that I'm constantly trying to search and be good enough. When I got in this peer group a couple years ago with other CEOs, it was really affirming to hear they're all in the same boat. They all have imposter syndrome. There are days where these guys running companies 3 or 4 times the size of my company don't feel like they're supposed to be there. And I think sometimes when, thinking back to when I was in financial services sales and I was walking in as somebody that didn't know and didn't have what this person had, I thought I needed to be so much more. I needed to present myself as something more, present myself as an expert. And really, I just needed to be there to listen. And I think, whether it was Dan from Preborn or talking to Anthony and the folks at OCF, I think, I want somebody who's interested in sharing with me what the church is doing, and how I can help. And I think that's really what I value, is I value the opportunity to have that exchange with somebody who doesn't expect a ton from me, because that's what the rest of everybody expects. Everything sits on the shoulder of a senior executive, or on the shoulder of somebody who's a high net worth individual. Even if they're just in sales or some other function, they tend to be relied upon by a lot of other people. So they're giving all day long of their time and their effort and their energy. And sometimes we just want to be listened to, and we just want to have a conversation that doesn't involve, all of the in-depth. And again, I'm speaking for myself. There's as many individuals in the world. There'll be a different type of person and personality. But for me, that's kind of where I get value, is I get value in having an opportunity to talk to somebody and hear about what the church is doing and how I can help. And I think, there was a phrase that Peter has on the website about the conference, and it's, I'm going to mess up the quote, so I apologize, Peter, but something along the lines of, it's about the ask and the gift, right? And that's the piece that I think when Anthony mentions being professional, you have to ask. What I don't want to do is have a meeting with somebody and have them talk to me about all the things that they're doing and then thank me for my time and leave. I'm like, oh, what am I supposed to do with that? I don't, thanks, good luck, bye. and I can hear them, and I've been in sales long enough to know I can hear them they're dancing around the ask, but they're just not telling me what they need. I'd rather say, hey, we're $50,000 short for the monument renovation at the cathedral. Do you know anybody could help, or do you have any ideas on how we can get there? Well, that's a much different problem for me to solve, and that's what I do for a living, is I solve problems. I'd rather help that way, and to the extent that I can give, I can give. To the extent that I know other people who can give, or we can do a paddle raise fundraiser, or I might be able to then work with you to come up with ideas. And I'd rather be a partner in that situation than just the only one, right? You can ask for a $50,000 check, but also the tools that Anthony's talked about and educated me on the last couple of years that are available, that he shared in last year's talk, as I understand. Those things I think are critical to think about, there are other ways to do this. And there are some folks that need that little push. They need a push to say, I would do this, but now I can say I would do this, but there's a financial benefit. There's a great book. I told you about the book, Who Really Cares?
Oh, yeah.
Anybody heard of that book, Who Really Cares? Anybody heard of Arthur Brooks? He's made, okay, good. Well, I went down the Arthur Brooks rabbit hole. Arthur Brooks is a Catholic author, and now he's been a podcast guest on everybody's podcast that's doing podcasts. I think he was on Matt Fradd a couple weeks ago. Arthur Brooks has a book called Who Really Cares? And if you haven't read that book and you're in this room, you should probably read that book. And it's an audiobook, and that's the only way Philip Rizzo reads. To include Bible in a year. Thank God for Father Mike. And now Catechism in a year. Done them both. But I think that book, Who Really Cares, he talks about that idea of why we give, who gives. And the book is really all about philanthropy. And it is all about, the thought process behind giving and what motivates people. And surprisingly, it's less than 50% are motivated into philanthropy by tax savings. That doesn't mean that tax savings, tools, and tips won't get them over the hump with their advisors, right? And again, I mentioned being an imposter. There are times when I will agree to something, then I have to call the accountant and say, can I do that? And how do I do that? Is that okay to do? I mean, the thing we did last year, we had Jim Wahlberg come out and screen his movie, and we did it at St. Augustine High School in San Diego, and we did it at St. Bonaventure with Doreen Saporito, and we had them screen this documentary for the kids, and we brought Jim Wahlberg out. It was great. It was not cheap. One, to bring him out. Two, to screen the movie, and then pay for all his travel. It's not deducted. It wasn't a tax deduction for me, and there's probably a way I could have done it if I would have worked with an advisor, but I didn't. And so again, having a partnership with how can we do these things and help build the church, and I think that's the piece that to me, when you talk about what's the value is helping us see how we can do more with the same amount, right? The Providence today, I did go to Mass after getting lost at Francis Xavier. Daily Mass is not in the school, by the way. It's a beautiful chapel, but it was pitch black except for the burning red candle. And I was like, I don't think this is right. So when I finally got to Mass, I had to go back and listen to the readings. because I missed it. And the first reading was Queen Sheba comes to visit Solomon after he's built the temple. And so if you haven't read the readings, you're off the hook. You can go back and read them. I'm just going to give you the summary right now. She goes to visit Solomon after he builds a temple. And after seeing how he's used his wealth, after seeing how he's taken care of the temple, and after hearing his words, she gives him 120 talents. I had to Google what a talent was worth. I had heard one time that a talent was worth a year's wages. According to Google today, a talent is worth 2 to 3 million US dollars. And she gave him 120 talents because of the words he said. So part of it, back to your point, is how is the money being used? How is OCF using the money? How is your foundation using the money? How is Campatiwa using the money, right? How is it being stewarded? And I want to make sure that if I'm giving a dollar, that a dollar is getting there. So back to tax tools and tips, I would rather give a dollar and have a dollar be received than give after tax 60 cents and then find out that 40 cents is being used, right? So it's also about how big of an impact can the dollar make.
Well, you bring up an excellent point about you want to know. So I've talked about this at other conferences. Business owners, executives, they're used to reading financials, and they don't see it as a gift. They see it as an investment. And so, again, when you look at an organization, is it important to you kind of who's running it, and do you kind of look at the financials, and do you try to understand more about how they're structured, and if you don't like it, then you don't really invest in it?
I would say that's true for me of non-religious investments. I would say if I'm giving money to a GoFundMe for somebody who's raising money for their kids' camp, I'm not as concerned. Are they doing a good job at the cheer camp or at the baseball camp? Or a friend of ours his son has a CF, and so I give the CF every year. But I honestly haven't looked to see how well CF is run. I think for me, the tie to the church is really the faith tie. Like, I want to see the faith promulgated. I want to see the faith grow. And I get inspired personally. Again, this is Philip. This isn't necessarily every donor you're going to talk to. I get inspired when I hear all the ways the church is reaching out into the world. So I'm obviously have friends and family that are involved in Focus. So I'm a Focus sponsor for a couple kids around the country, and one in Europe, which is kind of exciting.
Half this room is Focus.
Yeah, good. But I love that mission. I love that idea. I love to hear the updates and the emails, and so that fills me up. And I love to hear from our friend whose son has CF about how he was able to go to camp and have a normal day. And so for me, it's the impact of the dollar that's being spent is almost more important to me than are they tying things out? I know that's probably, if my CFO was here, he'd probably fall out of his chair. But to me, I'm just being candid. I'm not as concerned about that. Now, having said that, if they're not being a good steward, so if I give to something, we're raising money for fill in the blank and it doesn't come to fruition, that's off-putting, right? So, we had a renovation at our parish and it was $8 million. It was sinking into the earth in Huntington Beach. And as happens, because it's not a good place to build, in the desert with a high water line. And so 60-year-old parish was literally sinking. Well, I was very involved in the finances of that because I wanted to make sure, and that's my world, is construction and buildings. And so I was very concerned with how they were spending that money, and were they getting a good contractor come in and do the excavation, and were they taking care of it? So for that piece, I was 100% involved in the process. The flip side, I went to retreat center, Sacred Heart Retreat Center, with the faith formation kids, and it was beautiful. It was in the mountains, and they all had a great time. And at the end, the sister said, I was talking to her one-on-one, and she said, we really need money. So I wrote her a check. I don't know how well they managed the money. I have no idea. I know that I had a great experience at the retreat, and she asked me for money, and so I wrote her a check. And so I think it really depends on the project for me. but it is about the ask, and I do want to emphasize that. I think that's, in sales, they used to say there was a guy in insurance sales called Alfred Granum, and back in the 50s and 60s, he did this analysis of all the people who did sales. He had them keep a sales book, a client builder. Remember client builders? So I still have my client builder books where I track every phone call I made every day, 45 calls every morning. How many did I reach? How many did I get an appointment? How many appointments resulted in kept appointments? And how many of those kept appointments resulted in a sale? And he did that for hundreds of agents over 10 years, and he found the ratios were 10 phone calls, 3 meetings, 1 sale. And he calls it 10-3-1. So some of you may have heard that if you're in sales or in this world. There's a ratio. You all have a ratio. I'm sure someone's done the math on what the ratio is, how many donors you have to call on to get a donation or to secure a gift. The hardest thing is the rejection. And some of you have had a visceral reaction from somebody who said, I don't want to give because of the church scandal. I don't want to give because of this priest said this to me. I don't go to mass anymore because, my priest wouldn't give my daughter confession because of her dress. There's some hurt that somebody has that they've held on to, and then they give it to you, and you hold on to it, and then you don't ask, and you dance around because you don't want rejection. Like that's the fear. They say that the 2 greatest fears are public speaking and rejection. Your job gets both. So. Yay! And if 10-3-1 holds, it's 90% rejection. Yay! I'm going to sign up. Hey, can I sign up? Yeah. This sounds great. So I think you have to really have your purpose and your why, right? Well, building the kingdom of God, that's a pretty solid purpose. And I think, keeping that at the fore, praying about it, thinking about it, gets you through those doors. Because if you're constantly focused on that one time that person said something, it's going to prevent you from making the ask. And I will tell you, I want to help. I want to be able to help any way I can. And if there's a tool to help me save taxes, all the better, right? But I want to help. And I think what you'll find with donors who take time to sit with you, you're in the door. I mean, it's, one of my first sales jobs, I have had a lot of sales jobs. By the way, I was born in North Dakota, so nice tie-in that I full circle.
With St. Mary's.
And I first started selling.
You can tell they went there in the winter.
Lawn mowing services. That was my first sales, was lawn mowing service. But later sold cars, which was horrific. I wouldn't recommend it. It was a really bad business. But in selling cars, they said if someone stepped on a lot, and this was in the mid '90s when there was no internet and no MSRP stickers. There were no stickers on the windows. The window sticker wasn't a thing in 1996. And so I literally someone would come on the lot, you would just kind of make things up as you went. The whole thing was about, just get them in the door. If they stepped on a lot, 80% of people bought within 8 hours. Those are the statistics in the 90s. If someone took the time to leave their house to go to a car lot, they were ready to buy. Because, it's a horrific experience for everybody. The salesperson anyway. It's terrible. It is terrible. And so that's a crazy stat. So that's why when you try to leave the car lot, they introduce you to the sales manager, who, by the way, is just their friend Steve, because the sales manager's in the back on break, always. And so, let me introduce you to my manager. And they turn you and they turn you and they turn you and they teach you. And I saw a guy come on the lot and then he left. And the salesman walks back in and the sales manager comes out from his break and says, what happened? And they said, he was just looking. And he said, okay, pack up your desk, you're fired. And he fired this guy. This guy was like probably my age now, but at the time I was in my 20s, so he was much older. And he fired him. And he told him to pack his desk and leave this dealership. And I was like, wow. And then he told me the stat and made me watch this silly sales video on VHS. But the trigger for me was, think about that right now in your world. If you're in front of somebody whose time is valuable, they want you there. They're meeting with you because they want to find out how they can help. That's it. You're already there. I mean, you were so close to getting a gift of some amount, right? And if you get a chance to read the Who Really Cares book, which I listened to again on the flight. So Monday I was in California, Then I had to fly Monday night to Washington State. I flew from Washington State here yesterday. And on that flight, I listened again to Who Really Cares on double speed because I've heard it a couple times. So, but in that book, they talk about the kind of that creep, the gift creep. If I would have thought in my even 30s about giving the amount that I gave, in the last couple of years, I would have thought, no way. But I thought the same thing about going to daily mass. I thought daily mass was, oh, who's got time for daily mass? That's crazy. Lou Holtz, by the way, daily mass. Nick Saban, daily mass. The Pope, other people who were very busy.
Did I tell you I met him?
Yeah. Me too, by the way.
Actually, he really did. Him and AJ, there's a picture of him with the Pope. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's a true story. My son and I.
Hey, way to outshine me, but thanks.
Look, that's what I'm here for. By the way, the applause was for your wife for the 30 years of marriage. I can say that because I love Anthony. But yeah, that whole idea of gift creep, right, it's just getting somebody to come and be at the party and help, and then thanking them for their help and letting them know. I get a text every Monday. I get a text from Dan Steiner at Preborn every Monday with a gospel verse, and Dan's not Catholic yet. But I get a text every Monday from Preborn thanking me for my gift and how many babies have been saved, and right. And so that idea of keeping that connection going keeps me giving the gift, right? Oh my gosh, if I don't give a gift, they're not going to be able to serve young women in need. So to me, I think it's really important to make sure if you get in front of somebody, they want you there. So know that, right? The hard work is done. Once you're in front of them, you got to ask. You got to complete.
Well, so it takes a lot to get there. You need to be introduced by someone that they know and trust, and your time is valuable. So they get there, and you said you want the ask. But now step back for a second for the philanthropy officers about being prepared for their shot, right? For that shot. You're not really going to meet them a couple of times, as you said. So, and I think sometimes when we talk about, excellence, it's about preparation. You talk about reading books. If you could share a little bit, how many books do you read in a day?
In a day, not a lot. Except yesterday, I did read a book yesterday. But I probably read 24 to 30 books a year. And a couple years ago, started reading fiction book a quarter, because all the books I read typically are some level of business book. So, and then I go down rabbit holes. So I started an Arthur Brooks book. I read all the Arthur Brooks book. I started a Patrick Lencioni book. I read all the Patrick Lencioni books. By the way, another great Catholic, if you don't know Patrick Lencioni. And so I think when I think about being prepared, it's also just about understanding the language of people that are successful or that are in a position of authority or position to be able to give, is to understand those things about them, right? So there's books that I read every year, like How to Win Friends and Influence People. I've read that book every year for the last 25 years. It's a super simple book. If you haven't read it, it's really not about tricking people to be your friend. I made all my daughters read it. I have 5 kids, 4 daughters, and they all read How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's the best book in the world on empathy. So The Art of Humility is pretty good too, but that's a separate book. But I think that book's the book I read every year. What Got You Here Won't Get You There by Malcolm Goldsmith. These books that help kind of recenter me about the people side of the business, but also they help me understand people. And I think if you're in front of somebody, understanding, their thought process, what's important to them, why it would be important to them, it helps kind of get inside so you can understand how they can help. And everybody's, like I said, everybody's different. I've got 7 senior executives on my team, and we've all done, if you know Myers-Briggs, we've all done MBTI. Patrick Lencioni has one called Working Genius, which is great. We all have a different Working Genius. We all have a different Myers-Briggs score. We all have a different Gallup Strength Finders, which is, another one. There's all these different things that you can do to figure out who you are. And it doesn't really matter, right? The thing that's important about it is I know when I'm talking to Mike on my team, Mike has a certain way to look at the world, right? He wants to get things done now. And I wear a different hat. I'm more like the just wonder hat, and I'm just throwing out ideas and driving him nuts. And every time I come up with a new idea, he wants to, okay, how are we going to do that tomorrow? I'm like, I have no idea. I'm just talking here. I'm just making things up as I go. Remember, imposter. But being aware and knowledgeable about who I am and who Mike is, that allows us to have a better connection. So part of reading those books, and preparing is enough to understand your own lens, right? Because that imposter syndrome that we all have, it's important to understand why you might be hesitant to ask, why you might be hesitant to have the conversation. But I think getting in front of somebody, you have to be able to share what your organization is doing, how you're helping, how their donation or gift, what might make a difference, but then also be willing to ask them, what are they looking for? Early in sales, I got great advice, and the advice I got was a 2-word question, and you may have heard it. It's what else? And just ask that question and stare at people and don't say anything. What would you like to see the church do where you might be able to contribute? And they were going to say, I don't know, I'd like to be able to have new missiles. Okay, what else? Okay, what else? Don't answer for them. You'll want to, right? But it's just sitting there and listening. And that doesn't happen. But it also covers for a lot of lack of knowledge, right? So if I was in front of a high-powered lawyer and I'm like, I have no idea what to ask this guy. And my mentor said, just ask him what else. And then when he's done talking, say, okay, I'm going to take this back to the office. I'll put some things together and I'll come back to you with some ideas. You don't have to, you need to know enough about, like, you think of yourself as like a general practitioner. I think you need to know enough to know what specialists to bring in, right? Whether it's the tax specialist, whether it's the folks that your foundation's got in the network that can help with some advanced planning, whatever person you need to bring in to parachute in to solve the problem, you need to know enough about the things that are out there, and you have to prepare and have that ready. But I think taking time to think about the individual, researching the individual. The internet's great because there's so much on there about everybody, and the internet's terrible because there's so much on there about everybody.
Well, so, maybe a few of you are now starting to think, it's talking a lot about business, and then how does that correlate? We're a religious institution, I'm a sister, I'm a priest, and it really does correlate. One, you talk about that insecurity piece, that's big. The fear of rejection. And, in sales, part of that learning to overcome that fear of rejection is really working on yourself, right? That's the self-help books that work on that. So when you talk about being knowledgeable and getting the experience and reading the books, you're also saying self-growth, personal self-growth, right? And then as well as the other. So if you think of like what people might be thinking right now, which is, okay, this business, that means work in business. We're the church, we're the religious part. What would you tell those people right now that might be saying that in their heads?
Well, yeah, I think you nailed it a little bit there, is the idea that if you're going to ask for money, that you have to be prepared. But the block is always us. It's always here. I've never, when I was doing, commission-only sales, it was always, oh my gosh, I've got one shot to talk to this person. And it doesn't have to be that mentality. You don't have to have a one-shot mentality, but you have to have the confidence to be in front of them. They're a child of God, you're a child of God. There's really nothing that's stopping you from asking the question. And the worst thing they're going to say is no, right? So, but I think that sometimes I would find myself holding back, because once I ask them and they say no, I'm going to go find somebody else. Or maybe I'll just meet them again. Maybe we'll just have coffee again. Maybe we'll have lunch again. They were nice. Maybe I'll invite them to the event on Tuesday, right? And so we play this game with ourselves about, there's a great salesman, Zig Ziglar. And Zig Ziglar used to, you may have heard of Zig Ziglar? Yeah, a great Texan. And he said, I was a really good salesman. I could pull up to the front of somebody's office and I could tell you if it was a good time to call on them just by sitting in my car. And after a little bit, I'd decide it's not a good time. I might drive around the block a little bit and I'd say, no, still not a good time. You know what I should do? I should go back to my office. I should read up more on that deferred tax issue and the asset issue that Anthony talked about last year. And then when I'm really ready, I'll come back and talk to him. Besides, it's already Wednesday. I might as well get a fresh start on Monday, right? Monday's the day. I'm gonna call on them. Today I'm gonna go call on my mom again and see if she can donate some more money. And so what we do that, right? We just tell ourselves this narrative, this story, as opposed to, look, I'm good enough, right? The Lord is calling us, to make this happen. Like we're the hands. We're the hands. And so, if not us, who, right? We have to move forward. And I think about, when my wife and I went to Rome and Assisi last year, and then I brought my son to Rome and Assisi, and just being in Assisi and seeing, if you've been or you see the pictures, the basilica in Assisi that they built for St. Francis is massive. He died in 2026. They completed the basilica in 2028. Or I'm sorry, 1226, 1228. 2 years. 2 years. Makes you a little nervous being inside it. Like, did this pass inspection? It's Italy, so no, it did not. Somebody got paid. But the idea that
Hey.
I'm Italian, I can say that. The idea that you can ask, right, because of the cause, right? So Francis, famously very, very poor, and he's asking. We think about these donations, I know Peter is in D.C. In D.C., there's a Museum of the Bible. And if you go to the 6th floor of the Museum of the Bible, which is an evangelical museum, but there's a lot of Catholic stuff in there. There's actually a block from Solomon's Temple that you can touch, which is crazy. And now I know that the 120 talents from the Queen of Sheba helped maintain that block until it ended up in that DC museum. But I'm not thinking about that, right? That block is to the glory of God, right? This institution, that basilica, that church, the donors are there, but I don't know who built St. Francis Basilica. I don't know who built St. Peter's Basilica. I don't know where the money came from. And as a donor, I'm not as concerned about having my name on things. Personally, again, me personally, I don't need the Philip Rizzo Institute to fill in the blank. I want to just promulgate the faith. That's all I want to do. And I think if you're in front of somebody, there's something in them that wants to promulgate the faith. Otherwise, they wouldn't say, yes, I can fit you in. I mean, there's not spare time on my schedule. I don't have extra time to do things. And if there is, I'm going to bomb home. My oldest daughter's 31, and she moved around the corner with my 2 grandsons, and my wife watches them. And they literally live, a 3-minute walk from our house. So if I have extra time on my schedule, I go home and I play with my grandsons. That's what I do. And that's important to me. So if I'm going to take that time to sit with Anthony, he has to come with something, and then he has to ask me. Otherwise, I'd love to hear about what's going on at OCF, but I can read about it online. Tell me what you're doing and tell me how I can help.
So I want to leave a couple of minutes for questions. I want you to know, by the way, AJ, Anthony Joseph, his son, with CP, and in a wheelchair, when he brought him for the Jubilee year to Rome and to Assisi, and it was just him. It was a father-son trip, and he rented a Ferrari convertible.
Okay,
and
well.
he's going.
He went to the church.
He's going up the mountain of Assisi to bring his son there. And go ahead, you can finish the story.
Well, what's the story?
No, the story. Well, the story was people were looking at you going through the corners with your son.
Yeah. So it was my son's 21st birthday. So we brought him there, and my wife and I had been in March, and I just really felt called to bring my son. And AJ loves to go to mass. Anthony has seen him, during transubstantiation, he's literally coming out of his chair. So he's experiencing something at every Mass. And so I love to bring him just to experience it with him every chance I can get. So so we went without my wife. My wife did not know we were renting a car. Or that car. And but as a kid growing up in North Dakota, I used to pray at night for the if you were a kid of the 80s, it was the commercials that were on TV in Africa. I'd pray for all those poor children, and I'd pray for a Ferrari. I do not own a Ferrari, and nor will I ever own one, but renting one was a lot of fun. And to have my son be able to do that and experience that. And then we went, and when we got to the top in Assisi, you can't drive that car through the streets of Assisi, so we parked outside the city, and then he went and got to put his hand on the heart of Carlo Acutis and see where St. Francis was baptized and St. Clare was baptized at San Rufino. I mean, it's just a beautiful experience, and to be able to do that was really, really something special. So we did enjoy that.
Well, see, that was a good story.
Okay.
So, as we close, is there anything that you think now that you just want to just say that maybe you didn't have a chance to say, or just to sum up in just a quick minute, something, even if it's from the heart? I just want to give you an opportunity to close.
Well, like I said at the beginning, I wanted to thank you all for what you do. It's not easy, so I make light of asking and putting yourself on the line, but that's not easy, and it takes sacrifice of your time, and I think to be able to do that, to build the kingdom of God, to do His will, and to do it with love. And I think, when we think about making a gift, right? Again, I mentioned I make a lot of secular gifts throughout the year as well. To me, it's different, right? There's a different feeling when I do it for the church, and I'm less concerned, honestly, about how it's taken care of. But I want to be asked, and I want to do my part to give back for the blessings I've been given, and I think the folks that you get a chance to meet with want to do the same. And so, not to waste that opportunity, but to take advantage of the time you have in front of them, to be prepared, to be professional, but to be persistent and make the ask, because that to me is the one piece that I see get skirted. And I've had lots of folks share with me all the great things they're doing, and then they leave, and I'm like, okay, well, let's go.
And just so you know, Peter met him last night, and he asked even last night. That's amazing, Peter. You're an example of it. So when he says ask, he doesn't mean take your opportunity today with him. Let's leave him be today.
Philip, I have a question.
Yep.
So you said one of the most profound things I've heard come out of the words of a donor, and it's something that everybody in this room needs to internalize. You said when somebody comes to your office and tells you about their ministry, you don't want to be just in this chitty-chatty, tell me about what you're doing, and then you leave and I don't know what you expect of me. I think that's a profound thing for us as agents of change for our ministries to know. You're asking us to ask you for something.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's the piece. Is it's time, right? We only have so much time, all of us, and it's not, tomorrow's not guaranteed to anybody. So if we're here and there's something I can do, I want to do it. I want to be able to help. And if I can't, I'll tell you that. And don't be offended. Go open another door, right? If I said there's 10 doors and there's $1 million donor behind one of them, you wouldn't stop after 2 doors, right? But mentally, after 3, 4, 5, 6 doors, you're like, ugh. You know what? Maybe my mom was right. Maybe I shouldn't do this job, right? That's what my mom told me about every job I've had. But that idea that the rejection is the reason you're going to stop when someone is there and the timing's right and the time's got to be right. But we want to know what we can do to help, for sure. Thank you, Peter.
So any other questions while we have? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
You said you're from North Dakota. Are you a Fighting Sioux fan or Bison fan?
Oh, I don't know. What should I say? Whatever doesn't get me stoned. So I was Fighting Sioux. We were Grand Forks, and so so my sisters went to high school there. We were basers though, because you were either a baser or a towner, and we were basers, which made it difficult.
Yeah, go Sioux.
Yes.
I appreciated your sharing that you see your generosity towards the church as a gift more than an investment. I'm curious, for when we approach a donor who doesn't really have that perspective and they're more focused on the investment, was there some kind of moment or experience or way that you gained that perspective, and how can we accompany a donor to see the opportunity as a chance to give in addition to invest?
Yeah, I think that's one that you got to walk with them, right? Because I don't think you're going to convince somebody of that. I think they have to see it. And I think seeing it in action, right? So I think one thing for me, hearing back about what the impact is of what we're doing makes a difference. To hear from if it's a camp or a student, hearing directly, getting a letter from someone I've sponsored in Focus that says, to me, not to everybody that's contributed, but hey, thank you for your gift. I really appreciate it. We were able to bring in 4 kids into the church this semester. Wow. Like, okay, here's some more money, right? That's different. But I think the idea of is there something you can do to get them there? This is why I think the tools are important. This is why I think it's important to have the tools, because they might need to have that investment mentality until their heart's open to having the gift mentality. And that sometimes takes time for people. And so that's okay. Everybody's on a different journey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other
There
questions?
was one here.
Was
Did you
there?
have a question?
No.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I'm curious how you and your wife make your family's charitable decisions, and as approached by like a major gift officer, is there a way to like understand if you prefer to be approached as a couple or meet you alone at your office? How does that kind of come up, or how do you see that in other couples in your circle?
I would never say anything to all of you on this recording that I wouldn't say with my wife sitting next to me. My wife and I's relationship is like, she doesn't want to know. She's like, as long as I'm taken care of and the family's taken care of, and early on it was, our son has special needs, and she was concerned that if I'm giving money that somehow something's not happening, whether it's therapy or a chair or a lift system, something that he needs, or something that his friends need. So we also help out some of his friends whose families aren't as in a position to buy a lift or buy a stander. So we've done that and helped out other families. So she wants us to be able to do that as well. So as long as I can show her that we're doing both, then she kind of leaves that decision to me. I know that's not true for everybody, and so I'm fortunate that way. That comes with other things that our wives have known each other for a long time. So but that's how we do it.
Yeah. Remember, she didn't hear about the Ferrari until after. So, yeah.
Hi.
Last-
By way of introduction, we share a friend. Her name is Mary of Nazareth. I'm Celia Mistretta. It is so nice to meet you. If I approach you, or when I approach you to have a conversation, am I approaching this Philip Rizzo, the CEO? Am I approaching Philip Rizzo, the Army veteran? Or does it matter?
It probably matters where I am, right? If you're in my office meeting with the head of HR, and she invites you to introduce yourself to me because she knows I'm Catholic, then you're introducing yourself to me, the CEO, because that's where my head's at in that moment. If we're at Stations of the Cross fish fry and we're talking, you're like, oh, Philip's the CEO. In that moment, though, I'm Philip the parishioner. And so I think it really depends on the context. For me, it's just where my head's at. Like, I literally compartmentalize my life pretty well. As I mentioned, I turn off at 5, and I'm dad, and I'm husband, and I'm grandpa, and I'm all these other things. But to me, if it's in the moment that I'm in my office, then it's Philip the CEO. Now, if you in my office, you'll see I've got St. Michael the Archangel behind me, and I've got a plaque of Mary, and I've got other St. Francis is behind me, and St. Clair, and that's on all my Zoom calls with the Army and the Pentagon and everybody else, and I'm unapologetic about that. But I'm still in that moment still the CEO, right? So
Is there an opportunity for flex?
certainly, yeah. When I meet somebody,
CEO,
yeah,
Can I say, Phil,
yeah,
Dad,
yeah.
veteran?
Yeah, 100%. Once we get connected and I know what you're there for, then but it's going to take me a minute. But if you knock on my door and say, "Hi, I'm Mary from down the hall," I just talked to Leslie in HR. At that moment, I'm still CEO, right? Until we sit down and I give you 5 minutes, then I'm gonna let my guard down.
Thank you. Would you please give a round of applause to Philip?